everybody. Julie here from ARMS, and I'm extremely happy to introduce to you today a gal that I've been in touch with, Veronica York, who is doing amazing things in the DV industry and supporting a lot of measures. And not only that, but she works with high conflict divorces in the industry. And so I thought we would give her a chance today to introduce herself. Veronica, tell us about you and where you're from, and also about the connection with Barry Goldstein, please. We'd like to hear about that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. It's very good to be here, and I appreciate you taking that time out to talk with me. My name is Veronica York, and I am two things really. I'm a certified high conflict divorce coach, and then I'm also a domestic violence and child abuse custody expert. So basically what that means is I work with mostly protective mothers all across the country who are involved in custody battles where there is domestic violence and child abuse involved in their cases. And you mentioned Barry Goldstein. Barry Goldstein is one of the leading expert witnesses in this space. He is out of New Jersey and has been a domestic violence advocate, speaker, author, and expert witness for a very long time. He's been in the movement for over 30 years. He taught 21 years in a batterer program. So he not only has experiences working with protective mothers, but he also has experience working with the batterers, the abusers. So he has a very good perspective. He was also a lawyer for 30 years. He worked in the family custody cases that involved domestic violence. He's also authored 6 books on the topic. So he is a very wealth of knowledge. Him and I work directly together to help, victims of domestic violence who are going through custody cases.
Okay. That's quite the connection that you have. And I know he's done a lot of work in the industry. And when he was an attorney as well, was he also working those types of cases?
Yes.
He was. Okay, that's what I was thinking as well. So
he's no longer an attorney.
oh, he's not. Okay.
No, he's no longer an attorney. He does expert witness full time.
Okay, which is highly needed.
Yes.
That's good to hear. So great. And you first contacted us because you saw our website, I guess, on Google, correct?
Yes, I actually heard from you through a agency here in my hometown that utilizes your domestic violence training for their classes.
Okay, so word gets around in the industry, and we're pleased about that, and pleased to welcome you and make your acquaintance. So, and also, of course, have many clients that could benefit, from your services as far as those divorce cases. So, explain to me what a high conflict divorce really means.
I'm glad you asked that question because the term high conflict is really not the best term to use in these cases. And the reason for that is because courts tend to take high conflict approaches that create a false equivalency between a victim and an abuser. So when a court looks at a case as high conflict, it's really a disservice to the victim and their children. We call it that because that's what the courts call it, but 75 to 90% of cases that the courts deem as high conflict are really domestic violence and child abuse cases. So typically, abusers will use child custody to regain control, to punish the mother for leaving, and they're perfectly okay using the children in order to do that. They'll hurt the children in order to hurt the mother. And unfortunately, that's what most of these contested custody cases are. If you put it into context, the majority of custody cases are handled out of court. They're handled more or less amicably. It's only about 3.8% of custody cases that require trial and much more. And again, the majority of those are because it's a domestic violence and child abuse case.
Okay. And we have seen we've seen a lot, unfortunately, and especially lately, I would have to say even more so, of custody going to the abusive parent. No matter how hard the non-abusive parent is working to get those children, we see it way too often, and that, of course, can lead into more of what we'll talk about, because I know you're working on some laws that might be changing for that. But as far as your role is concerned, I assume you can meet one-on-one for coaching with people in the situation of high conflict. And then is any of that admissible in court? Should the need arise for that, or how does that work?
Well, the first thing I tell clients is that I'm not a lawyer, so I don't give legal advice, and I'm not a mental health professional. Um, in fact, a lot of the mistakes that are made in custody cases involving domestic violence and child abuse are because they are relying on the same mental health professionals that they've been relying on for decades.
Okay.
And the problem there is that mental health professionals are certainly valuable because they're experts in mental health and they're experts in psychology. And there are definitely issues in those areas in these cases, and they're needed for that. The
Mhm.
problem is that with rare exceptions, they do not have the domestic violence and child abuse expertise that are needed in these cases. And so, you know, I work with clients to really specifically talk to them about how to navigate their case in regards to documentation, in regards to communication. And communication is probably the biggest thing, because it's very important how you communicate with your abuser during a custody case. It's very important how you communicate with your lawyer and other professionals in your case. And also the third thing would be strategy. So communication, documentation, and strategy are the three biggest things that I help with. And the best thing is if their lawyer is available to work in collaboration with me, so that we can, provide the best strategy together. These cases really need a multidisciplinary approach, meaning they need a professional in domestic violence, they need a professional in the law, which is their lawyer. If there's mental health issues involved, they need a mental health professional. And then they also need, if there's substance abuse, they need a professional in that. So the thing is, those are three separate issues.
Mm.
Courts like to lump them all together, or they might make the mistake of thinking that domestic violence is caused by mental illness or substance abuse. But that's also not the case. Research shows us now that domestic violence is caused by a belief system. And typically it's the belief that the you know that the abuser is entitled to make all the decisions, and she has no right to leave basically the relationship.
Mm.
And because of that belief, they believe that they are justified in the abuse that they cause.
Right. And I'm so glad as a professional to hear you say that, because we do still to this day get a lot of calls and talk to a lot of victims and hear, well, if he hadn't been drunk or if he hadn't been smoking weed or whatever, this wouldn't have happened. And it's substance abuse and domestic abuse are two different issues and they have to be addressed separately. So if we are allowing an expert in one of those areas, why are we not allowing an expert in the other area? Is so important. So we have a
Yes.
lot of mental health professionals that take our training, and a lot of PhDs, a lot of MSWs, and I always kind of survey them, and I say, "So, how much training in school did you get on domestic violence?" And I'm sure you can guess the most common answer that I get is, "Oh, we had a 45-minute film, and then we
Mhm.
discussed it." And it was like, no, we in the field who are considered DV experts have had hours upon hours and upon hours of
Yeah.
training in domestic abuse and connection with, victims and advocacy work. And those, are the people we need to be able to tap in these cases where, especially where the custody is at risk of going back to, an abuser. So yeah,
Mhm.
so it's always nice to meet people that agree with us that it's a totally separate issue, and same with mental health. He struggles from depression. I need to
Mhm.
convince him he needs to go on meds. Well, he may need to go on meds. He may have depression, but we meet people all the time that are depressed and people all the time that maybe, have an issue with substance abuse that choose not to be abusive. But there's some deep
Absolutely.
down belief there, that says it's okay to act this way, and to use those as excuses. So, yeah, that's a very important point and topic on that. So, given that, it sounds to me like you're working on a couple of potential laws that are going to help us in the domestic violence community. And I was hoping you wouldn't mind going over those a little bit and sharing some of that information and also where they are as far as in the process of where they're at, and how we can get on board and be knowledgeable about these laws.
Absolutely. Yes, we're working in all 50 states to try and reform the family code, the family law situation that we have, because it's extremely broken in these particular cases. As you mentioned earlier, there are so many instances where a protective parent is pleading for the court to help them protect their child, and the court just wants to just say, it's a he said, she said, and we're going to just do 50-50 and move on down the road. This is causing a lot of children to be devastated by the long lasting effects of adverse childhood experiences and even death. I mean, there's been over 860 children who've been murdered, who have been involved in contested custody cases in the last 13 years. So we definitely need to make some changes. And there's a couple of things we're doing, both on the federal level and the state level. So on the federal level, there was, with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, there is a law in there called Kayden's Law. Kayden's Law came from Pennsylvania, from Kathy Sherlock, who was a protective mother who pleaded with the courts to help her protect her child, Kayden. The courts failed her, and Kayden was murdered by her father. And since then, she's been working tirelessly to try and change the system. Countless other mothers in different parts of the country are in the same boat as Kathy. And Kayden's Law did get enacted into the Violence Against Women Act when it was reauthorized. It is on a federal level, and basically addresses things like prioritizing the safety of children to where they cannot be taken away from a protective parent just because the other parent is claiming alienation or something to that effect. It addresses mandating judicial education, so training judges and lawyers and evaluators and guardian ad litems about domestic violence and what to look for, and the patterns of abuse and things like that are super important, and the current scientific research that we have that they really need to implement. And then it's limiting evidence and qualified domestic violence experts. So instead of bringing in experts who, like evaluators, who are just mental health professionals, we need to bring in domestic violence experts who are experts in domestic violence and child abuse, so that they can speak to those patterns and things like that. It also restricts dangerous reunification therapies that are happening, again, where children are being taken from protective parents and sent to what they call reunification camps that are extremely harmful, because they're being taken away from their primary attachment figure who they're bonded to, and asked to be reunified with someone who they consider harmful. So those are the things that we're addressing with Kayden's Law. And in addition to that, we have the Safe Child Act, which is very similar. In fact, a lot of the provisions of Kayden's Law and the Safe Child Act are the same. But the Safe Child Act also talks about having not only the safety of children as a priority, but the health and safety of children as a priority, because the two main bodies of research that we use as expert witnesses is the ACE research and the Saunders study. The ACE research goes specifically to the well-being of children and the impact that domestic violence has on children. Because a common mistake that's made in the custody courts is that domestic violence is the harm is the physical injuries. And we know that most of the harm from domestic violence is not caused by any immediate physical injury. It is the stress and fear that abusers cause that causes the most harm. And so in the Safe Child Act, we specifically address health as being a first priority, so that we can implement the ACE research, the adverse childhood experiences research, to really try to minimize the consequences that these children are having from living in this stress and fear. And those consequences include anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, suicidal ideations, and long-term effects like cancer and heart disease. Because stress, we know, has a major effect on long-term health. In fact, Barry and I are in the process of writing a book that we are going to be comparing the ACE research to the Surgeon General's warning back in the 60s that linked smoking and cancer.
Wow.
Because that created some really great societal changes that helped people realize that smoking is not a good thing. We changed how we educated people about smoking. We changed the laws on advertising smoking. There were a lot of things that happened to help the health of people related to smoking. And so we feel like the ACE research can be that same thing in regards to child safety and when it comes to domestic violence and child abuse. So we're in the process of writing a book for that. The other thing about the Safe Child Act is that we can implement the research that ACE and Saunders. I mentioned ACE a little bit. Saunders is a study out of the National Institute of Justice in the U.S. Justice Department, and it was a study that assessed the domestic violence knowledge of judges, lawyers, and especially evaluators, because judges and lawyers get a lot of their information, and often most of the time misinformation, from evaluators. And so that study is extremely important for custody courts to implement when they're making decisions in these specific cases. The other thing is the Safe Child Act, once if enacted, would require an evidentiary hearing that would be limited to the domestic violence and child abuse in custody cases before you could get into any of the other stuff. So we'd have this evidentiary hearing first. That way we know the health and safety of the child is being prioritized. And that's important. And then also the Safe Child Act, like Kayden's law, wants to educate lawyers, evaluators, and all court professionals on domestic violence and give them that training that they need, and make sure that we use this multidisciplinary approach that's needed in these cases.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, the effect of on children and the fact that that can be long-term and even lead to other things. And, there's a great book that I've read, and probably you have too, but The Body Keeps the Score,
Yes.
And is there any hope is what I want to know. Is there any hope for getting to the point where our legal system recognizes abuse other than physical and sexual in our courts, in our restraining orders, in our custody hearings, and all of that, when we know now, as our community knows and our experts know, that emotional and psychological and verbal abuse and all of that can cause bruises that are there for years and much harder to heal from than physical abuse. So what would be your thoughts on that? Maybe your book will be a start to that. That would be wonderful. But any thoughts on, is it ever going to work to get the courts to recognize the damage that non-physical abuse can cause?
Yeah, you mentioned the word hope, and I think that's exactly what we have and what we should have is hope, that these things are going to come to fruition. And yes, I mean, because I get to work with protective moms all over the country, and not just this country, but other countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England. I mean, we get calls from everywhere. In fact, Barry and I are doing a conference in Canada in November to talk about these issues. And we have hope because there are so many women and children being impacted by this epidemic, really is what it is in our world, in our country specifically. And with the passage with Kayden's law being introduced on the federal level, I think we definitely have hope. And it's educating and getting the word out. I mean, unfortunately we have opposition as well, and people who don't see it the way we see it. And there's always two sides of a story, and that's why I think it's so hard right now to get this movement going into effect as far as the laws being changed and lawyers and judges and evaluators changing what they do. Because number one, they've done this for so long, their entire careers, they've done things one way. So to change a whole system takes time, and it takes a lot of education, and it takes a lot of patience. So that's one thing. Another thing is just trying to, get our voices heard above some of the other voices out there that are in opposition and don't understand kind of what our movement is dealing with on a daily basis. And I think that probably the biggest hope that we have is just that the voices that have been saying this for so long are starting to be heard a little bit more. I can tell you that as expert witnesses, when we go into the courtroom, we are seeing a change in judges listening a little bit better. The National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges seeks to train other judges on ACE and Saunders, the research I mentioned earlier. They are starting to realize the importance of training judges in this area and making sure that that the priority is the safety and health of the children, and how to do that in a better way. So yeah, I think there's definitely hope, and we just the point is we just can't give up, and we have to keep fighting. And even though, I mean, I have my days and I know others have their days of wanting to just go, no one's going to listen, and I just don't even know if I can do this anymore. But it's okay to have those days, but then you just move on and you say, yeah, well, we're just going to keep trying, because if we don't do it, nobody will. And it's really about the children. It's really about saving them and protecting them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a local committee here that I facilitate that you know about, called the Survivor Voices Committee. We work with the Family Justice Center in Washington County. And recently we found ourselves needing to write a letter to the judges and the attorneys that, form up this board, and sharing with them how a survivor presents when they're up there in court. And often, as we know, that includes a lot of trauma and PTSD. And it may appear that they're crazy when they're really not. They're just, they're just traumatized. And we made suggestions as far as how to approach them and how they would appear. And last we heard, they had taken it to heart, and they said that they were going to look at those things and work on those. So there's that hope word, I have that hope. And then spread it from this county, to the rest. And I think the laws that you are working on are going to be a big help if we can get those passed, in those areas. Because what I understand now, at least in our county, our judges, there is DV training available, but it's optional for them. And it shouldn't be optional in our legal system, and it shouldn't be optional for attorneys and people in family law, because they just are not experienced enough to recognize the manipulation of domestic abuse, right? And they're just enough into it that they can still be manipulated even by the abuser. We see counselors like that as well. And so that's all really important work. So we appreciate that. Can you tell me more about this conference in November?
It is a conference in, oh gosh, it's, you're right, Canada. I'm trying to remember the specific area, but off the top of my head, it's a virtual conference. So we're not actually traveling to Canada, unfortunately. But we will be discussing the research, ACE and Saunders, and we'll be talking about what you just said, training judges and the fact that they don't have the knowledge and specific training that they need to look at these cases as they should. The Saunders study did find that court professionals do take a mother's anger and frustration in dealing with her abuser and in dealing with professionals who she feels are not protecting her children, all out of proportion to what it says about her parenting. Right, that was one of the findings of Saunders. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that, and about the legislation and things that we can do, solutions that we have to put in place so that more children can be protected and more mothers can be heard, and not without the research, the courts really believe the myth that mothers frequently make false reports. And I think that's one of the main issues that we have, is that it's almost like in their training, they're trained to be skeptical of any reports of domestic violence or child abuse, which is very sad, because that's one of the biggest hurdles to get over, when the research specifically says that there's a study called the BALA study, BALA, that says that mothers in contested custody cases very rarely make deliberate false reports. In fact, it's less than 2% of the time. And on the other hand, fathers involved in contested custody cases are 16 times more likely to make deliberate false reports.
Wow.
That's what the research shows.
Wow. So we got to get that out there for sure. Is the conference something that is open to anybody if they wanted to register, or to other professionals?
I believe so. Yeah. And I will, after this, I can get you the specific information and links to that conference.
That'd be great.
So that you have it.
I will add it on, and hopefully maybe be able to take it take it as well. Do you know offhand the dates in November that it's on?
Um,
Stretching your
I didn't pull that out, but I think it's November 17th. I'm gonna look on my
okay.
calendar.
So we won't say for sure the dates, but
Yeah,
when you send me the link, I'll add it into this video. So,
yeah.
thanks for all your time. What about you personally? Is there anything you want to share with us about you personally? What makes you tick? What hobbies you enjoy, where you're from?
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that I'm actually in the Dallas Fort Worth, Texas
Ah,
area.
okay.
That's where I am.
Cool.
And, before I got into this domestic violence movement,
Mhm.
I had a 20-year career in television sales. So I worked for TV stations in Dallas and in Austin, Texas, selling television.
You did
But,
quite the switch there.
yeah. Um, but I was married to an abuser for 10 years. And during the relationship, during my marriage, like most victims of abuse, and again, there wasn't physical abuse in my situation. It was all verbal and mental and emotional.
Mhm.
And so I didn't realize that I was being abused. Yeah, I just felt like life was miserable, but I didn't understand why. A
Right,
lot of times I felt it was my fault because that's what I was told. It's
right,
my fault. It's your fault. You're the reason I'm acting this way. You're the reason everything's horrible. You're the reason life is okay. So that's what I thought. But when I was able to come out of the situation and look back into, I started to really research, what is this narcissistic personality disorder and how does it affect others, and the gaslighting and all of those things that I didn't know about. And
right,
then when I started to read about them, I think all victims have this moment of like clarity, like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like that really is a thing, that happened. And now I can understand why things were the way that they were.
mm,
And so when I got my divorce, I have two children.
mhm.
And for the first couple of years, it was, not, it was, just pretty amicable. But it wasn't until, and most abusers have their triggers. It wasn't until I met my husband that I, started the high conflict
Mhm,
custody battle.
mhm.
And so through that experience is how I learned that the court system was just broken, because I felt like no one understood what I was trying to say. You mentioned it earlier, is that the abusers they're liars and they're manipulators, and they're very easy at doing that. And I have to take a step back because I thought, well, yeah, I mean, he did that to me. I was lied to, manipulated, and I thought he was great. I married him, and it took me a very long time to figure out who he truly was. So we have to understand that as well with these, professionals in law and family law, is they get manipulated as well by the abuser. And so, it takes time for them to really understand who this person is, and that they're really doing, no one wants to believe that a father would hurt their children deliberately. No
Right,
one wants to believe that,
right,
and we don't want to believe that people can hurt children in order to hurt someone else, or that they would just blatantly lie about things or make things up, or a lot of times they live in their own reality and they believe what they're saying even though it's a lie.
right,
So I realized going through the system that there was a lot of things that needed to be changed and corrected, because you know the children were being harmed, without you know without them really understanding why or how they were harming them.
right,
And so, it's a process, and that's why I think it is hard for us to make changes and to move forward and to have things change, is because again, it becomes a he said, she said, and in reality, it's hard for judges and lawyers to understand who's telling the truth and who's not.
sure,
It really is. I mean, if they only get to hear a specific or a very small portion of a case or what's going on, how are they supposed to know?
right,
Well, that's why these things are so important. And so, having gone through that myself and experiencing the court system and the way I was treated, We haven't talked about gender bias, but that's widespread in the family court system. There have been 40 government-sponsored studies, basically in 40 different states, about gender bias, and they all found widespread bias in the court system. Common examples of that are holding women to a higher standard of proof, giving women less credibility, and blaming women for the actions of their abusers. And you know, gender bias is something that's done, you know, not deliberately. You know, gender bias, good people engage in gender biases, and even women, you know, engage in gender bias, and they do it unconsciously. They don't do it on purpose. But the problem is that when you talk about it, people tend to get defensive or even retaliatory. And so what needs to be done is it just needs to be talked about a little bit more. So that people can realize, you know, it's usually done because of stereotypes or, you know, belief systems or things like that. But it's really a big problem, especially in these cases.
Definitely. So what have you done that's been successful to work on your own healing so that you can then turn around and give back like you are?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of it was just research. A lot of it was just understanding the problem so that I could understand how to, first of all, why it was happening. Because I
Right.
think a lot of us think, we look at the court system and it's easy to say there's corruption, or
Mhm.
it's easy to say that they're doing it on purpose. And a lot of times that's not the case. Most judges and lawyers and evaluators and court professionals really want to do a good job, and they really want to protect children. They just don't know how, because they don't see the patterns, and they don't understand, and they don't have the training and the education. And so, you know, that's something that we can help with, right? And not just say, well, it's corrupt and it's not going to change. But if we can educate and we can help them realize really what is going on, I think that most of them want that. They want to be able to do the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate your time. We'll also put up your website information and all of that. Are people free to contact you if they have additional questions about these laws or how they can help? Well,
Yeah, absolutely. My website is yorkcfs.com. So YORK, C as in cat, F as in Frank, S as in Sam.com. My phone number is on the website. My email is on there.
okay.
So yeah, absolutely. I'm on Facebook.
You are highly reachable. Okay.
I'm highly reachable, and I'm happy to speak with anyone. And, you know,
I love it. Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your time today. It's been incredibly helpful to learn of somebody in the industry that's going after with a passion, towards these things that we need to happen and change. And, that gives us hope. So that's a good thing. So I thank you for your time today. Thanks for visiting us. And we'll catch up later because I know we still have lots to talk about. So, all
yeah, thank you so much.
right. Thanks, Veronica.